The War for Western Civilization. Ever heard the saying, lose the battle, win the war? It's time we conservatives stop sitting in this echo chamber. America is a success story unlike any other, a rebellion against tyrannical rule built upon the divine promises of our Lord. We have fought battles to protect our beliefs, including battles abroad to share those beliefs. Meanwhile, as we focused on other countries, we lost sight of our own. Little did we know that there was war brewing on the home front, a war that we are losing. Somehow, under our noses, when nobody was looking, our country has fallen into a Marxist totalitarian ideology. The anti-capitalist ideology is trying to become systemic within the schools and the government, with pushes for banning speech deemed harmful, the double standards of burning an American flag being legal, but burning an LGBTQ flag can get you 15 years, like a man in Iowa, the quote-unquote gender-affirming healthcare, dragging children kicking and screaming into the world of politics, such as the case with Jeff Younger, where his 9-year-old son is being transitioned by his ex-wife in California. The apparent bias in big tech silencing Republicans is proven by Elon Musk's Twitter purchase. On top of all this, the pro-life versus pro-death debate shouldn't even exist. We live in a country where a white male can be a black female. Does that sound normal to anyone? We are a laughingstock abroad. It's no wonder Russia invaded Ukraine. Who could take our current administration seriously? One of the people invited to the White House for the Respect for Marriage Act was a drag queen who performed for children named Marty Cummings. There were more pride flags than American flags being flashed around D.C. Not too long ago, we traded the Merchant of Death for a druggie named Brittany Griner, who ironically has taken knees to the same country that bailed her out. Meanwhile, Paul Whelan, an American soldier, has been imprisoned in Russia for 4 years and is still there. Because he isn't gay, he will probably be there another 4 years. I can go on and on. So, my fellow patriots, do you think we are winning these battles? People need to understand, as of now, we are losing the war. The only reason conservatism is still alive is that all the older generations are still active. Meanwhile, the younger generation has had their minds poisoned. Once these older generations pass, all that will be left is narcissistic Marxists who are doomed to repeat plenty of mistakes that could easily be thwarted by opening a history book. That's one of the crazy concepts. These children don't read anymore. They TikTok all day, and they've leached themselves to big tech. I encourage you, parents, to go home and ask your kid if they would rather give up the internet forever or give up a leg. If your kid answers give up the internet, pat yourself on the back because that is the unlikely answer. Children have branched their lives and opinions to whatever they see online. The Brave New World is a book written in 1932 by Aldous Huxley. It has been banned several times throughout its existence. This is because the content of the book was so shocking to people. But sadly, the book doesn't shock people anymore. The book depicts concepts like gay relationships, sexually charged societies, the sexualization of minors, history being forgotten, and religion being abandoned. George Orwell wrote 1984, which directly challenged Huxley's writing. His concept followed more of the fascist route, where people would be banned from books. Huxley's The Brave New World had an even scarier vision than books being banned, and it just so happens that it was accurate. The idea was that people would be so distracted by science and technology that they wouldn't even care to read anymore, resulting in a lack of need for religion, philosophy, and many concepts that kept humans moral creatures. Do we see that lack of reading today? How many people under the age of 18 have read the Bible? People fail to understand that the Bible shares thousands of years of knowledge in philosophy, unlike some random 20-year-old college nihilist who doesn't realize he has so much to learn. That guy is most of our population these days. People don't care about Socrates. They don't care about Plato. They don't care about the fruitful teachings the Bible offered to the structural integrity of this nation. The Bible developed our nation's moral compass. Biblical stories and philosophy taught us the truth. It took us from being barbaric beasts and turned us into civilization. To be a Christian, to be a conservative, is to reject your animalistic nature, to reject instinct in the name of the greater good. This means that when you want to hurt someone, when you have a sexual desire, and when you start to hate humanity, the truth of the Bible will shepherd you onto the right path. The devil is always waiting for you at the crossroads, trying to woo you off the right path. In the end, you have two choices: to educate yourself and reject your primal evil and walk with God as Adam did in the Garden of Eden, or to take the devil's path at the crossroads and cower behind a bush, fearful and embarrassed by your nudity. These radical leftist so-called intellectuals believe they can determine truth and right and wrong without the guidance of God. Using terms like their self-truth, they forget the most basic morals and good-natured laws were based on Western culture. There is only one truth, and that is the Bible's truth. A self-truth means you have nothing to base your beliefs on except the materialistic worldview. That's why you have modern Satanism, which teaches people to do whatever makes them happy no matter how immoral, because you have one life. Groups like MAP that openly wish to pedophile children, and hate groups like the LGBTQ community, which ruin the lives of people and bully anyone who dares oppose what they stand for. Their self-truths are just another one of their grammar changes. When they say self-truth, they mean their totalitarian beliefs. They use pride, which is one of the deadly sins. God flooded the earth and promised he wouldn't do it again by giving us a rainbow. This is ironic because that group uses God's promise as their symbol for doing the same sins that caused him to flood it in the first place. The radical leftists have forgotten that this is a nation under God. As said by Ronald Reagan, if we forget that we are one nation under God, we will be a nation gone under. America has spun into a downward spiral. I woke up one morning and thought to myself, wow, all someone needs to do to gain my respect is have basic common sense? Something as trivial as being able to say men are men and women are women gains my respect? I don't understand why these groups can always claim to turn to science when I don't understand why these groups always claim to turn to science when trying to prove their points. Scientifically, if gender didn't matter, I wouldn't have the primal capabilities to tell the difference between a man and a woman. Clearly, our brains are hardwired to determine the difference because it fundamentally matters. Speaking of common sense, Thomas Paine wrote that society should be everything constructive and good, that people come together to accomplish common goals. He adds that government should only protect life, liberty, and property, and should be judged by its ability to protect those. While judging by the data that places like the Guttmacher Institute provide, our government clearly fails to protect life since around 900,000 babies are murdered every year. The government isn't focused on liberty when within our schools and systems, thinking freely is now considered harmful. They can't protect property when our national debt exceeds $31.5 trillion and counting. Nor can they protect any of us with the extremely low recruitment numbers of the army. Instead, the country has programmed its people to hate itself, to convince people of fallacies like the country was built on slavery, such as the completely false 1619 Project, or such as how the FBI has admitted to identifying extremist groups by their use of American flags. So you look at a country that has taught its people to hate it. Nobody is going to want to protect it. I wanted to enlist until I saw a woke army ad campaign showing that by protecting my homeland, I'm protecting people's sins. I want to further God's kingdom, not Satan's. In the old days, people wanted to enlist because they believed they were protecting God's ideals in Western culture. But sadly, nobody wants to protect our country in its current state. In my school, people constantly call America, and I quote, the worst country in the world. I can't believe how fast people forget history. Are they unaware that Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were only a lifetime ago? Some people who lived through the worst hell on earth are still alive today. Do they not realize that countries like those still exist, like North Korea? I believe America is failing to teach people the dangers of group identity. What is this? Group identity, or collective identity, is the concept where you determine your thoughts and beliefs based on what your group tells you. You see it heavily used in the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago focuses on the dangers of this concept, where people can be loyal to a group. This loyalty can cause them to deny the reality around them, such as how the Russians convinced themselves they were living in a fruitful country. Meanwhile, people were being put to death by the millions and starving, all being common knowledge. They all knew millions were dying in the name of utopia. He talks about how this group identity can make people do things they would never do if they were their own decision. The LGBTQ, Antifa, and radical leftists all rely on this ideology. I mean, the literal name LGBTQ implies if you happen to accept gay people, well, guess what? You need to accept trans people as well. Why do the sodomites need to protect trans people? They are entirely different situations and ideologies. They leech onto concepts like Marxism. You could actively see the disgusting roots in which they branched this group identity when they attempted to root themselves in the black community. BLM, an organization that scammed many people, would slogan, "Black Lives Matter." The LGBTQ community tried to capitalize on George Floyd's death by getting in on the action. You'd start to see slogans like, "Black Trans Lives Matter," even knowing George's death had absolutely nothing to do with them, because they like to play the victim. They like to add more letters to their extremely long name. They want more people to join the hive mind. Notice how these groups protesting for equality are not interested in being equal. Saying all lives matter is offensive. But why? They find it offensive because it's inclusive. Feminism, LGBTQ, and Black Lives Matter, the one thing they all have in common is that none of them mention all people. This is because these groups don't protest for equal rights. They protest for more rights. Things like men using women's restrooms or reparations. Ironically, I'm no feminist, but my grandma always said, "It's a man's world." I never really agreed until I saw men dominating women's sports. These groups are fundamentally destroying equality in the name of equality. People like to think, there is no way we would ever become as monstrous as Nazi Germany, but this isn't true. An entire country of millions of people were willing to become Nazis. The Milgram experiment proved that most people are willing to commit horrific acts on others as long as an authority figure tells them to. Every single man has the potential to be as terrible as a Nazi, and that is a terrifying concept. Luckily, Western culture understood man's inherent evil and the power that authority holds over man by building the country off of God, which is mentioned several times in the Federalist Papers. By having checks and balances, they put together a country that was tyranny resistant. It was a diverse country that invited people to it to escape religious persecution, let poor people become rich, follow the American dream, and create a foundation of freedom and justice for all. It was the first of its kind and encouraged innovation and new thinking. That's why it's terrifying that our First Amendment rights are being threatened. When you limit what people can say, you limit what people can think. Jordan Peterson, whom I believe to be one of the wisest influencers of this decade, sadly lives in Canada, a socialist country, where he is being re-educated for having his unique ideals. It's amazing how many concepts you can see are terrible just by looking abroad. Look at Germany. They completely opened their borders, and now every crime statistic has skyrocketed. Protests are breaking out to reclose them. Or how Germany has deemed so-called hate speech illegal, which can run you prison time. Or like at Scandinavia, which had billions invested in making male and female jobs the same, only for men to come out dominating engineering fields and women coming out to dominate nursing fields. I don't understand why America always has to learn the hard way, when our neighbors have already learned the lessons for us. Communism doesn't work. We had a real-life social experiment called the Berlin Wall. Germany was divided in two, and everybody on the communist side of the wall was in turmoil and wanted to escape to the American side. The founding fathers built this country to escape tyranny, and that has been the case up until recent years. I've studied every Supreme Court case, and I always find it a bit queer because sometimes when they can't decide, they try to determine what the framers intended, when it's obvious what they would choose. If you time traveled and asked the framers about some of our court rulings, they would say something like, "By the heavens, what madness is this?" The Supreme Court has overstepped boundaries in many cases, such as Obergefell v. Hodges, which should have been a state-by-state decision, not a federal one. Conservatives lost another battle. Although I'm sure there is power to overturn it one day, it's gotten to the point where schools have been given this inch and taken a mile, where they promoted so many LGBTQ ideologies. I had a teacher who told the class she could tell if a girl was a boy by the age of 3. The only conservative teacher at our school says that Jesus accepted and loved everyone, so we need to do the same for these groups. He and many Christians are very incorrect. Jesus loved the sinner, not the sin. There's a huge difference. He loves us all, but he never supported sin. He openly argued with tax collectors and corrected the sinners around him. That is exactly what we need to do. We need to warn our neighbors of sin. To love thy neighbor as thyself is to hold your neighbor to the same standards that you hold yourself to. If you don't want to be silenced, if you don't want to destroy our tradition, if you don't want to go to hell, then stop letting your neighbors tread that path. I have been outcasted by a massive portion of my school for being an open conservative Christian. I get name-called almost weekly. Bigot, racist, transphobic, because I don't want to see people go to hell. I was once ousted by an entire group of my friends for saying that George Washington was a hero. What has our country come to? Where are children learning this? Why do our leaders find it beneficial to teach people to hate our amazing country? I'll tell you why this happened. Republicans don't play below the belt. They exchange shots on a hypothetical battlefield within reasonable confines, whereas in the left, plays dirty. They edit language, turning terms like baby into clump of cells, short to vertically challenged, handicapped to disabled. By editing this language, they echo chamber their beliefs in ways that many make conservatives unable to speak the same language as them. Their language allows them to turn men into women and abortion into healthcare. After you think they can't play dirtier, they one-up you. They target your children. One local elementary school in my area had a doctor tell the boys and girls they could be the opposite gender. During my high school Pride Month, they had ze, zer, them pronoun signs, 9 different variations of gay flags, and depicted drawings of bearded women. Then, when I dared to try and start a Turning Point chapter, they denied me for a month straight. They told me, "Oh hell no," called it harmful, and said they feared it would cause students to get violent. So let me get this straight. We can't be conservative out of fear that the left will hurt us? So why am I getting shut down and not the people who want to harm us? Several communist students at my school said, "I think it's justified to be violent." All this isn't to say that we need to fight dirty back. What we, as Republicans, need to do is stop being cowards. Start speaking up. Hitler's big lies started as hundreds of small lies, and by the time somebody finally spoke up, it was too late. We need to hold these radicals accountable for their disgusting actions. Don't give leeway, and don't negotiate with someone who tries to justify the mass murder of millions like these Marxists do. No more drag queen story hours. No more justifying school shooters by concluding their mental illness is to blame. And no more indoctrination. Throughout high school, students spoke terribly about Christians, and our church told us we should be more accepting of the left. This is why we lose. Nobody stands up and tells them how we feel out of fear of getting canceled. But the truth is, if we all stand up together, united, we can't fall. And we can start helping our brothers and sisters and finally reinstate our traditional Western culture. We need to stop being compliant and we need to stop being patient. We need to take a stand. The next time someone treats you like garbage for being conservative, don't just take it. Tell them exactly how terrible what they said is. The next time someone does something terrible, report it and make it public. Stop moving on. It's time we start holding people accountable. Start writing names. Start consulting your local government and make your voices heard. Put up signs and share your shock with your community. Most of all, put your children in private schools. This is scorched earth. The government must listen if they aren't receiving your money. The government can't run a woke education system if they have empty classrooms. We need to allow citizens to decide if their tax money goes to public or private schools. And we need to stop giving government money to colleges that are teaching students garbage and pumping out pompous narcissists. We need to work together to help schools like PragerU and Hillsdale go more mainstream. As well, Daily Wire has started working on children's broadcasting. Reviving traditional education is the way to restore Western society. We need to defund Planned Parenthood and put the government spending into the reconstruction of the foster system. Donate to campaigns of the Republican government officials. Be the voice for them. Watch out for rhinos trying to stick their horn into our party. Our government doesn't know what they are doing. Inflation is increasing and debt is rising by $100,000 every 5 seconds. The government has no clue what they will do about the Social Security situation, and they will likely print more money to solve it, which is terrible. Let's go total free market, secure our borders, stop letting federal government be so big, and start being local again. Let's stop spitting fire and start building things. The left will never get the message, so we need to be better. Hold ourselves to high standards and make conservatism look cool. Politics isn't about arguing or debating, it's about finding solutions. Rather than argue with irrational fools, let's come together and problem solve as a democracy. Let's work together as a nation united under God. That is how we will win the war.